welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us with this very important topic on how we help our teams and our organizations move forward with succession planning and all things that deal with challenge, change, and of course, a crisis.
Well, you know, this is really a hot topic because if anybody caught the vice presidential debate last night, both of the candidates were asked, given the advanced ages of the presidential candidates, how they were going to deal with succession planning. And I don't know if anyone else noticed, but I know that Mary and I did, that both vice presidential candidates stuttered, stammered, and kind of avoided the question, which is something we see a lot in organizations today. It's so easy to be focused on the tasks at hand that really thinking about the people in place, what you need for the long-term sustainability of your organization often gets overlooked. So we're excited to have you here today. I'm Meridith Elliott Powell, and my co-author, a colleague and peer, Dr. Mary Kelly, is joining me today. So, Mary, what do you think about succession planning and really what people ought to be looking into and what they should grab from today?
So, Mary, you know I'm an economist, so I'm persuaded mostly by numbers and statistics and real facts, not the kind that people twist. We all learned how to do that in statistics classes, I think, in high school and college. But I like actual facts. And one of the facts that I see all the time is that 10,000 baby boomers are turning 65 every single day. And with the current situation, many of those people who are going to continue to work, because most people say they want to work to be about 67 or 68 years old on a national average, but many of those people are not going to continue to work past maybe 65. And reality is the average American does retire at age 63. They don't make it to 67 like they thought. And mostly it is because their own health, the health concerns of a spouse or partner, or even another family member. So because of that, that's 4 years of work time that we have to kind of make sure that we're thinking about the what ifs. What if that person sitting in the big chair just decides they have to retire early? Or what if that really talented CEO winds up getting an offer from another great company? What if they decide, you know what, I'm not gonna stick around anymore. I've made it to the top and I've decided I want to go out on a high note. So there's all kinds of reasons why CEOs, presidents, and owners might decide to leave an organization. But as you and I have talked about extensively, it's not just the owner and the CEO and the president of the company we have to be concerned about. And that's what we're going to get into in this program today, because we all know that long-term succession planning is long-term success in our organizations.
Yeah, it's the most important thing that you needed to focus on, in my opinion, in an organization is the long-term growth. You know, when you hit a crisis, when you hit a challenge, there is so little you can control. I mean, think about it. We're living in a time right now where the majority of things that can impact your business, they're outside of your control. Nobody knows when COVID's going to be over. Nobody knows what's going to happen with this election. Nobody knows what's going to happen with the economy. You can't control those things. But what you can control is the talent, the depth of talent, and the long-term action plan you have for the sustainability of your organization. And what Mary and I focus on, and what we want to focus this webinar on today, is what are you doing to build your succession plan? And want you to think really broadly about succession planning and who succession planning impacts. Quite frankly, it's the strongest and highest return on investment you can have, is to focus on the depth of talent you surround yourself with and the continuity that your business is going to have because you focus on that.
That's exactly right. And when we talk about answering that question, and Meredith, you touched on it, there's a lot of what we call in the economics world external shocks. You can't prepare for every contingency. So what you want to do is prepare your people to be able to react appropriately when there is a challenge, a change, or a crisis, or even a transition. And that means building your bench so that you've got crossover, you've got coverage, you've got people who are able to move the organization forward, even if there's an absence for whatever reason. This morning, Korn Ferry, their consulting group, came out with an article about whether or not it was whether or not a CEO's health should be made public. And so many of my CEOs were saying, well, of course, my health would be a private matter. And what Korn Ferry pointed out in this article was, as a CEO, you are considered a public figure, like a sports figure. So HIPAA rules, you would think they would apply to you, and I would hope they certainly would, but HIPAA rules and the privacy of your own health isn't necessarily protected. So then you say, well, gosh, this is a balancing act. If the CEO has a cold, then does everybody care? The answer is probably no. But if the CEO has a major health crisis, is this going to have far-reaching ramifications in the organization? Could it cause their company's market price to drop? Could it cause big problems? When Steve Jobs was first diagnosed, they did keep it pretty quiet until he came out publicly. And then we did see that Apple stock drop because people were concerned about the longevity and the viability of the success of the organization if a key player was in fact absent.
Yeah, I think the most important thing to really understand about what succession planning does is it lets the world know you have a plan in place to keep the business going, protect the interest of your customers, your board of directors, your vendors, your employees, that goes beyond the person running the organization. So one thing that Mary and I really focus on, and it's one reason we teamed up, is that we believe succession planning is something that every organization should have, no matter the size of your organization. Whether you're a large corporation or a smaller organization, you need a succession plan. You need to have something in place.
And this is part of your strategic plan. Many people don't include succession planning as part of their strategic plan, and we think it's a critical element. How can you plan for the future of the organization if you have not built your talent bench? And just like any good coach of any team, and I don't care if it's a college team or a pro team, but every coach is always on the lookout for talent. You're always looking around. For every game you watch, you can't help but be looking and going, I wonder if I could get that kid. I wonder if that kid would come play for my team, because you're looking for talent. And you have to be able, as a great leader and manager, to spot raw talent, but then you also have to matriculate it. You have to cultivate it. You have to encourage that talent. So once you've got the right people on the team, and now you're building that leadership depth, you've got to make sure that you're moving your team forward, and that's as a team.
Yeah. And, is also, again, the heightened need for succession planning because of COVID. We keep drawing attention to current events, but they're really underlying the importance for succession planning. When we saw the president get COVID, and then so many of his team got COVID, you were able to see that the administration was still able to function and to move forward because of the depth of talent. Now, campaigns, whether they be Republican, whether they be Democrat, typically you have a depth of talent in there, but you've got to ask yourself in your own organization, if you got sick, if somebody else in your organization got sick, what's your contingency plan? And succession planning is a contingency plan and something that you need to have in place, answering that all important question: who comes next? Who could fill in? Who would take my place if something happened to me? Who is going to fill that? Well, I'm just going to say that red chair right there is a symbol that Mary and I have. And who do you have sitting to take that seat? Should you be out of it for a short amount of time, or you decide to go off into the sunset?
That's exactly right. And we know statistically, again, that of CEOs, only 40% of them make it past the 18-month mark. Yeah. And partly that's because CEOs are sometimes brought in to clean house. They're brought in to make wide sweeping changes, or they're brought in to be an interim CEO until a permanent solution can be found. But think about the loss of productivity of those CEOs who are brought in as interim CEOs, interim presidents, interim leaders, where you either have a choice, and in many cases, you're like a lame duck CEO. You can't really move things forward if you're not considered the leader for the long term. People simply don't take it seriously. And they might be thinking, okay, if you're only here for an interim, I'm just going to sit back and be status quo and hope that whoever does come in to make permanent changes recognizes that I'm going to be part of the team. And again, one of the things Meredith and I, when we started working on this project, one of the things that surprised us was how many of our senior leaders and they're used to thinking about their people. That is, their focus is on their people. But when it came time to succession planning, they were mostly just focused on that one chair at the top. They were not as concerned with the long-reaching ripple effects that it was having on the other categories of people, not only throughout the organization, but also customers, clients, vendors, and suppliers. So when we talk about who else is impacted by changes, it's not just that person at the top.
No, it's in fact, it's what you want to think about when you think about who is impacted by changes is if you ignore succession planning, you're going to have long-standing, wide impacts of negativity and challenge for people. But if you approach succession planning positively, we want to show you who's impacted by the change and how many people would be impacted positively. Again, coming back again to this idea that it's one of the strongest in returns on investment. So, Mary, I couldn't quite get the infographic to turn, so we're going to jump right in to who is impacted.
So there are 7 categories, and the easiest one to think about is the person leading the organization, whether that's the CEO, the president, and sometimes it's the owner. Now, Meredith and I have both worked with family businesses who have had to make transitions. Now, sometimes the family business transitions to another family member, but sometimes it doesn't. And then sometimes there are family members who stay working in the organization with someone at the helm who is not, in fact, a family member. And this all has to be handled in a sensitive and delicate, but also business-focused way. Let's face it, not everybody is cut out to run the company. Some people don't want to make hard decisions. Some people are so worried about being liked that they won't be respected. They're so worried about pleasing everyone that they please no one. And we know that it's easiest to look at that one position at the top, but nobody is successful by themselves, because we all know that succession planning is much bigger than just that person at the top.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that really differentiates the work that Mary and I do from so many others who work on succession planning, is that we really believe and we work to build succession plans that go throughout the organization at every single level. Because when you have that depth of leadership at every single level of your organization, that's when your organization is foolproof, and that's when your organization is set up for long-term sustainability. So it's about so much more than just the CEO.
But, you know, one of the things that you and I found out when we started doing more research and we started interviewing several CEOs was that mindset and the obstacles that pop into your brain when you're the person thinking about maybe stepping down or moving to another organization. And what I like about the book we did, Who Comes Next, is that we put together worksheets and a tools library so that people who are motivated and want to include this as part of their strategic plan can include these elements as part of their organizational issues. And in the strategic plan that we compile for people that we work with, we include several of the tools from our tools library. And part of this is, you know, when you're thinking about stepping down, what concerns you? And we've dealt with all of these 10 issues. You know, some of our CEOs worry about whether or not they're replaceable. And you worry about, are you too easily replaced? Are you not replaceable at all? Some people worry about their own sense of identity. There's a loss of identity. Well, what do I tell people if I'm no longer the CEO of XYZ Incorporated? Some people worry about what they're going to do with their time. So because of that, we can minimize our key players leaving, because whenever there's a change, those people who are your secondary tiers, your really great senior leaders, they wonder, is the new person going to want me as part of the team? Is the new person going to value my contributions? Do they value my knowledge? Am I the right fit for this organization as they transition moving forward? And for some people, the answer is no. And some CEOs do want to bring in a whole new team. So it affects not only the CEO, the president, the owner, but it also affects those senior leaders who are part of that C-suite, and even the vice presidential and director positions, wondering, if that person at the top leaves, they get sick, they take retirement, or they move to another organization, what happens to me?
Yeah, I definitely think that underestimating the fact that your C-suite is working for an individual. I know that when I was in corporate, I followed my boss 3 times. I really wasn't as impassioned about the organization that I was working for, in that I was impassioned about the individual that I was following. At the same time, had I been in line for succession, had I known there was opportunity for me in the companies where I was working, that may have been a different decision. So you need to be mindful of the fact, whether it's technically C-suite or it's, just some of your key people, they could leave if you lost a leader. So you need to be thinking more broadly about that.
That's exactly right. And this is why we encourage organizations to actually implement a transition planning team. And this can be people representative from different divisions, different departments, but also different levels, so that they've got their finger on the pulse of what's happening throughout the organization, the concerns of people involved, what's happening. Do people feel as though they've got enough knowledge about potential changes? The reality is, we all know change is going to happen. It is inevitable. It's just a matter of when and how. The great thing is, with an active transition planning team, we get to control the when and the how.
Yeah, Mary, I was just sharing with you today that I was on with a client, a smaller organization who's going through some succession planning, and they just offered promotions to 3 of their key employees. But part of that was that those key employees could not take those promotions until they had their replacements in place. Now, I just love this tip, because we tend to think of succession planning as this huge master plan. But this was just a CEO sitting down and saying, congratulations. I see opportunity for you in this company. I see you moving into this position in the next couple of months. But no, you cannot move into this position until you have your replacement in place. Succession planning can be simple.
And if not simple, it can at least be structured and process oriented, so that the checklists that we use all the time are so helpful to people getting through this, and taking what is a complex situation, breaking it down into manageable tasks, and keeping it as simple as it possibly can. And again, from our tools library for the planning team, there's an obstacles assessment. Do people know what to do to take the right step? I'm working with a client in the architectural field, and the question I asked them was, do you all know how to start the succession planning process? And they said, no, that's kind of why we called you. And I said, okay, that makes perfect sense to me, but let's figure out what this looks like if we're going to start this process. And they're organized. They know when their top executive is going to step down, and they're openly and honestly talking about it and how it is affecting the rest of the organization. And they're happy in their jobs, and they're confident discussing this, which makes the process so much easier. But you and I both worked with an organization where the person at the top said, I don't want to tell anybody when I'm leaving because I'm not sure, that could create some disruption. Well, okay, big secret, they know you're thinking about leaving. If you're a certain age, and I don't care what age that is, whether it's 50, 60, 90, it doesn't really matter. They know that you're not going to be around forever. So they're thinking about it. So you need to be honest with them about what you're thinking as well. And we need to also understand that the skills and the requirements for someone else coming in is going to probably be different than the skills and the requirements for what got that person hired 30 years ago, or 10 years ago, or 5 years ago. Because proactive organizations are looking at what they need in terms of skill sets for the future.
Yeah, and I think that CEOs and executive teams need to really understand that, again, one of the highest returns on investments you are going to receive is from investing in the talent that you have around you. Jack Welch, the legendary leader of GE, used to say that there were just 3 things that a leader needs to focus on to be successful: cash flow, customer experience, and the engagement level of their employees. Well, in my opinion, Jack Welch had the luxury of leading in a time that was easier than what we're going through right now. Because if you focus too much time and attention on cash flow, you can definitely lose your customers and lose employees. If you focus your time and your energy on customers, you could go broke making them happy. But if you invest your time in engaging your employees and building that level of talent, you'll not only have a strong team that can drive innovation, drive change, and be as passionate as you are about the growth of your organization, but you'll drive cash flow and you'll drive the customer experience. Highest and best use of your time.
It's absolutely right. And many times we talk to execs and they think, well, this is only affecting me and maybe my top tier team. Absolutely not true. What a lot of folks don't realize is your people are watching you, and it's every single person who works for that organization. I was on a plane sitting next to someone who worked for an organization, and he was fairly low in the organization, but I would consider him a high potential employee. He was smart. And here's what was interesting. Even though he'd only been hired for about a year, he read every single thing the leadership wrote. Everything. He could quote it, book, chapter, and verse. And he said, well, this is how this affects me, and this is how it affects my friends, and this is how it affects these people on the line, and this is how it does this. I mean, he clearly follows this. Those are the kinds of people that you want to make sure that you are harnessing their potential, and you want to make sure that they're going to be part of your team moving forward. And Meridith, you know about a situation I was working with a financial institution where there was a gal, and she'd been there for about 8 years, and she was the front runner. She was smart and ambitious, and her team loved her, and everything she did was just great. And the CEO was stepping down, and I asked him, who is your top choice? And he said, well, it's her. And I said, well, have you talked to her about that? And he said, well, no, if I tell her that I'm thinking about her as my replacement, then, she might take her foot off the gas pedal. I'm like, wait, you're going to trust your multi-gazillion dollar company to this person, and you're saying you don't trust them in the same sentence? That makes no sense to me. And so I had a conversation with her, and she shared with me privately that she was being actively pursued by other companies for months. And she said, but I've gone to my boss and I've asked him, where do I fit in the organization in the future? And he hasn't given me any indication. So then I go back to the boss and I'm like, you really need to have this conversation with her. And he's like, no, absolutely not. And I don't want you to say anything either. Well, now I'm stuck because I work for him. I can't say anything. Well, guess what? 3 weeks later, she got an offer she absolutely could not refuse. And because they had not told her she was being groomed for this top position, she took it and she was gone.
Yeah. It's, holding on to your high potentials is so easy, whether, again, you're a large corporation or a smaller organization. Just take a moment, walk, go outside, take a walk, and really think about who can you not live without? And A, have you told them that? B, what are you doing to train and develop them? And C, where do you see them fitting into the organization long term? That's an action you can take right now. Now, Mary, let's talk about board of directors.
So my boards of directors, depending upon the level of engagement of the boards, and some are more hands-on than others, some are more active than others, but they have a very big role to play in terms of not just, again, succession planning for the top tier leadership, but also throughout the organization. And I love my great boards of directors who are looking, again, they're like your ancillary coaches out there spotting talent. Sometimes they can help direct people. And right now with about an 8% unemployment rate, we've got access to talent now that we did not have access to a year ago. So this is a great time to have everybody on the team be scoping out for talent, have honest conversations. But again, it starts with those honest conversations. And one of my friends who was also in the Navy with me, same last name, but she was great. And one of her senior enlisted advisors advised her from first day on. He said, you need to lead so that if you don't show up or you do get sick, that everything's great. Everybody knows what to do. Everybody understands your mission, your vision, and your goals. But if you make yourself so that you're the only person who can make decisions, that when you're not there, nothing else happens, you're letting the organization down. And I always thought that was really, really smart.
Yeah, I call this leading through the power of the question. Years ago, I worked for a boss who I simultaneously found the most frustrating and best boss I'd ever worked for. And so he was frustrating because whenever you went in to ask him anything, he would always say, I don't know, what do you think we ought to do? He never answered anything. But here's the crazy thing was that within 2 years of an incident happening where he'd really kind of pushed me over the edge with having to, answer something, come up with my own idea, he got promoted to corporate center. And what I noticed was when he left the area, we didn't need him. He had taught us not only to lead, but he taught us to think. And you need to learn to lead through the power of the question if you're going to build a strong succession planning.
You're absolutely right. And as you know, I spent over 25 years on active duty in the Navy. And some of my business people say, well, what in the world would a military person know about business turnover? Well, in the military, you got to remember that we're only in a given job for 2 to 3 years, which think about that. If you're running an organization and 33 to 50% of your workforce is changing every single year, that could be wildly disruptive if you let it. But that's not what happens. We know going into a job, the first thing you do is you grab that turnover binder that somebody left for you, your predecessor, and maybe the predecessors after that. So sometimes you'd see all these different color handwritings and things like that. And a lot of times we just hit print on the computer and print out all the resources we used. But the idea is you've got to set up your successor for success. I realize that's a lot of S words all in one place. But that means you've got to be constantly reiterating what those people need to be doing. You share resources openly. You help people move forward. And that means that you're not just watching out for other people, you're also watching out for your ancillary people, the people you work with. When I was assigned to Pearl Harbor, we have a huge shipyard there, which means we've got suppliers and partners and vendors, and they need to know if there's going to be any major changes. And this is also true in the business world when we think about this, because we oftentimes think it's just about our employees, but it's not. It's about the people we partner with. It's also about our clients, our customers. If we have a change, will they be impacted by this change? Does it affect how they view our company? And so we promise people a quick start. And so I think, Meridith, you've gotten to this in the PowerPoint because, we love to talk about this. We could talk about that forever. But we do have a checklist that is designed to help you with the quick start of succession planning. And if you're thinking about doing this, you might want to consider looking at this checklist. Meridith?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we want to get to the action here. We're coming close to the end of the webinar and want to be respectful of your time. But this is, again, it's part of the tools book. One of my favorite things about the work that Mary and I have done is that we have the book that really goes through succession planning, but we designed this workbook to go with it that really walks you through all the steps, the strategies, the tools, the resources, and the checklists that you need to be effective. And this is your this is your succession turnover checklist. I mean, employees can create more seamless transitions for their replacements if they prepare a turnover binder. And this basically walks you through the time, the goals, the people, the budget, and the legal, all the pieces that you need to think about to make succession planning seamless. Notice that, again, we said employees can create. A succession planning doesn't always have to be done at the top. It should be done by the people who are stepping into the next role and that they're taking responsibility to backfill their position, make sure that the talent is there. I mean, again, it's one of the things I think we really learned from the military. I love the fact that you say that, Mary, is that, you're only in this every 2 to 3 years. And you're going to have a lot of talent on your teams that come in, that these are people that are looking to be promoted. They want to move on, but empower them to say, I need you to find your replacement. I need you to find that talent. All hands on deck, looking for talent all the time, training talent all the time. And what we did is put together a book and a workbook, and quite frankly, an online course that helps you do that helps you take those steps.
So I love that we were able to put together this online course because, many more people are working from home and they don't know how to start. So our goal when we put this together, and we started this a couple of years ago, was to make the information just accessible to as many companies as possible. Because some organizations will want to bring us in person, and that's great. But a lot of family businesses, smaller businesses, they just need to know what to do next. So we map this out in this lesson plan that's in the online course, and it's also in the book. But if people need some extra help, Meridith, I think we said that we would offer just a free strategy session to people who need help.
Yeah, absolutely. All you need to do is go to our emails there, just email one or both of us, and you can set up a free 30-minute strategy session. And then if you follow this link, which we'll send out in the webinar recording, you can check out our online course, which both can be done self-study as well as in person. And I want to invite you to learn more about my colleague here, Mary Kelly. I mean, she is an unbelievable vault of free free tools and resources at productiveleaders.com. And you can check out her videos, her resources. And believe me, the book she wrote with me is just one of several she is putting it into place.
Well, and then I get to brag about Meridith Elliott Powell because Mary, you've got such a great breadth and depth of understanding of corporate problems and solutions. And together over the summer, because of the COVID global pandemic, we were so fortunate to work together on the paper called COVID-19 and the Future of American Business. Identifying the 6 buckets of opportunity, and that's people, resources, processes, technology, sales and marketing, and entrepreneurship in about 41 pages. And then we also identify the challenges, opportunities, and solutions. And that is available at meridithelliottpowell.com as well.
All right. So, more resources, you can go to Who Comes Next. The point is, no matter the size of your organization, the depth of your team, everybody needs leadership succession. It's one of the highest and best uses. It is a hot topic right now. And if you are looking for competitive advantage, if you are looking for long-term sustainability, you can put your time and your energy here and get a strong return on investment. So if you go to whocomesnext.com, you can find out more about the book. You can find out more about the workbook. And hey, you can even get a free chapter and get the tools workbook for free by emailing the paperback receipt if you get a copy of the book to info@productiveleaders.com.
And the team will send you that as a PDF. And again, we identified succession planning as such a challenge for so many organizations. And we all know moving forward, we've got to be helping each other. So providing people with the tools from the tools library is just such a great way to get organizations to get started on this very important part of their strategic planning.
So we really want to thank you for joining us today. I hope that you enjoyed the program, as well as going to join us for future succession planning and leadership webinars as Mary and I continue to collaborate, continue to work together, and continue to do what needs to be done to help you understand and answer the question, who comes next? Thank you.
Thanks.